I'm Echo.
And I'm Scarlett. And Echo is trying her best this podcast, so let's all give her a break.
So, Scarlett, when you think of our home state, what are the first things that come to mind? You think small towns, you think cornfields. How long would it take you to think of ghosts?
Seeing how we're not Kentucky, that wouldn't be like the first thing because I don't know. It's something about Kentucky when you travel and you stop at a rest area there, you see like thousands upon thousands of brochures for haunted Kentucky. But I don't
Okay.
think I've seen very many ever for Indiana unless you're like Googling stuff online. So
Yeah,
it
for
would take me a
sure.
little bit. I mean, I know a bunch of the haunted stuff. I don't think you're going to bring up some of the ones that I knew because back when we were finishing high school, me and you were going to try to do this haunted road trip around Indiana that we never got around to. And I think it
Yeah.
was mostly because both of us were like, we're not an adult enough to stay in hotels,
Yeah.
just the two of us.
But Indiana has way more haunted ghost legends than you would think because we definitely don't advertise our state as like a haunted state. Anybody who isn't from Indiana, probably the only reason you would think haunted Indiana is because of that documentary that Ghost Adventures Zach Bagans did on the Demon House in Gary, Indiana. That probably be the only reason that you would think of Indiana as a haunted state. But we have tons of ghost legends in our state.
Well, I mean, I've lived in two houses that were both haunted, so
Yeah, but there have been enough ghost legends that a local author named Kevin Green has written 2 books on the subject, covering a lot of different haunted locations and whatnot. So that's where I got most of my research. So this first one I'm going to tell you about, Scarlett, you may or may not have heard of because it's pretty close by to our hometown. It's in Bobtown, Indiana, which I think is in our county, but not in our town.
Bobtown is where my one aunt lives.
Okay. So
Yeah.
it's a gravel road. It goes through this nice wooded area during the day. It just looks really pretty, really serene. But you might think twice about driving through there at night when I tell you that back in the 1800s, it is said that local poorhouses and asylums would hire local men to go out and bury their dead in that stretch of woods in cheap pine boxes in very shallow graves just to save on the expense of burying the bodies. And that road is known to flood. So every spring, whenever it rains and it floods, the coffins would get washed up out of the ground and be strewn all through the area. And so that's why this stretch of road is called the Coffins. Truth be known, there isn't really any like substantiated evidence to prove that this actually happened, but that is the legend. The hauntings you can expect going through that area are shadowy figures to be seen walking through the woods. Have you heard of the coffins before?
Yes, and a little fun fact about it, when I was younger, there used to be a haunted like trail, I think, out there. It was like the Coffin's haunted trail. It
Mm-hmm.
it only was like a couple year thing, I feel like.
Yeah.
They don't do it anymore. But I had heard up the road and I had heard that specific thing that you had told me.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, oh, I wonder if she knew it used to be a haunted attraction. Like,
I do. I actually have a little side note because I decided I wanted to do like a little bit more digging into this one. I didn't do it for all the locations, but for this one specifically, I did look up the coffins area on Google and I popped up. The first thing that popped up was an article specifically about that haunted attraction. Turns out that a lot of people were not very happy about the haunted attraction. The next one, I think I'm going to do a little bit of a 2 for 1 because the stories are very similar, even though they're different locations. I'm going to first tell you about the Azalea Bridge. Do you know anything about the Azalea Bridge?
yes,
Okay.
you're
Uh,
coming up with a lot of the ones that I actually know a
yeah,
fairly
like
decent
I kind of
amount.
wanted I wanted to pick ones that were more more kind of local to us, like that you might know
Yes.
about too. This one is located just west of Highway 31 in Bartholomew County. And the reason it's supposedly haunted is that it is said in the 1830s, a young unmarried teenager from the like little village of Azalea, she became pregnant in the late summer and she was able to hide her pregnancy through the fall and the winter, but in spring, obviously, she could no longer hide her condition. And obviously, back then, that kind of thing was really frowned upon. And so, at the urging of the rest of the village, her parents unfortunately disowned her. She ended up wandering around, and after the baby was born, she and the baby would hide in abandoned homesteads in the area. They would take shelter there, and the mother would just be scrounging for any scraps of food she could so they could survive. However, when winter came again, the stress of her situation obviously was starting to get the better of her, and it led her to do something unspeakable. On a warm spell during the winter had caused the creek under Azalea Bridge to get deeper and have the water flow faster. And on one full moon night, the young mother walked out to the bridge with her baby wrapped tightly in its blankets, and she dropped the baby to its death in the icy water below. For a time after that, the young mother persisted. She was struggling to survive, but most nights she could still be found sitting on the edge of the bridge, rocking and sobbing and lamenting what her life had become. One morning, a passerby discovered her body still sitting on the edge of the Azalea Bridge. She had passed away in the night, I'm presuming from freezing to death, because the story didn't really tell us exactly what her cause of death was. But the haunting you can expect there is if you stop on Azalea Bridge on cool fall or winter nights, especially during the full moon, and you look down into the water, you could see the image of the baby still wrapped in its white blankets, staring back up at you from the water. And you may even hear the young mother's distraught cries. So, yeah, that's the Azalea Bridge. The other one, which you have probably heard about as well, Scarlett, it's the Crybaby Bridge. I remember you would always roll up your windows anytime we'd have to go over that.
The Crybaby Bridge is one of the things I've known about pretty much since middle school.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
Back then, like I got into this phase of reading ghost, like haunting stuff from around here. I had heard a bunch of stuff, and when I had read that one, I was just it like put me off a little bit because it wasn't the only bridge story like that for Indiana, which
Yeah,
makes you wonder if the events only happened at one bridge, but
yeah,
people are saying, oh, it happened at this one or it happened at that one,
yeah,
or if they even happened, if it's just hearsay.
yeah,
But anything that involves ghost children, just I don't like that. I would be the first person to nope out of a situation if I am in a confirmed haunted house and I hear like a little kid laugh. Like that's just a no.
yeah, for
But
sure.
I would be all like, nope, I'm gone. Nope, 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 not doing it. So I like the crying thing. I don't know. It's just one of those weird things because when I hear crying, I have to investigate, and I'm like, I
Yeah,
just don't want to have to deal with it.
yeah. So, the main difference between the two stories is that Crybaby Bridge is said to have been the site of a fatal car accident where it
Mm-hmm.
killed both the parents and the baby in the car wreck.
Mm. Oh, that's
Um,
right.
yeah, so that's like the main difference of that one. Like it's a more recent one because there were vehicles.
What was the other bridge called? What did they call it in the
uh,
book?
the Azalea Bridge.
That one is also said that sometimes instead of the baby, you'll see the mother,
Yeah.
and that she will ask you if you've seen her baby.
Okay.
And then that the other story that goes along with that, I don't know if it was in your book or if you had heard it, was that she had done it and then she was so distraught over what she did that she jumped too.
Yeah, that one, that part of the legend wasn't in this specific version of it. But
Hmm.
again, this is one of those things that there's no like substantiated evidence that this actually occurred.
No,
So like a lot of
I'm
Indiana's ghost legends are like that.
I know. I'm just saying that's another one that you hear a lot. You bring up the bridge, you'll hear that she jumped too, or that she'll ask you if you've seen her baby. But yeah.
Yes. So, yeah, basically the Crybaby Bridge, the haunting there, basically you would hear an infant crying if you're on that bridge at night.
Hmm.
So that was like a short little 2 for 1 there. All right. So this one is one you probably haven't heard of. It comes from Brazil, Indiana, and it dates back to the 1860s. And it kind of goes back to our first episode a little bit on paranormal games that you probably shouldn't play. It's it's called the 100 Steps Cemetery, and like I said, it's located in Brazil. And it is said that if you arrive at the 100 Steps Cemetery just before midnight and climb the crumbling old steps towards the graveyard, make sure you're counting each step as you go. And while that may not sound difficult, the task is made a little more difficult by the fact that it's a very old cemetery. The cement steps are crumbling and they are overgrown with weeds and grass. Once you reach the top, you are supposed to turn to the empty field next to the graveyard. And especially on moonlit nights, as most ghost legends go, the spirit of the graveyard's first undertaker is said to appear to you. He will not say anything to you, but he will give you a vision. And this vision is supposed to be of the way you will die. Once you've had your vision, you can turn around and go back down the stairs, but don't forget to count the stairs as you go back down. The catch is, while you're counting the steps, if you get to the bottom and you get a different number of stairs than you got going up, then the vision of your death will come true. It doesn't say how soon it will come true in the legend, but like it will come true. If you try to skip counting or skip going down the stairs at all and just try to walk down the steep hill on the grass, the spirit of the Undertaker will reappear and push you down the steps or the hill.
Well, okay then.
Yeah, but I just thought that was kind of an interesting one. And this is one that I also have been able to find like a little extra article about. And so like this is one of the ones that actually has like a little bit of like truth to it because I saw that look on your face. Like it's got like documented kind of proof for it because um I found a newspaper clipping, like a picture of a newspaper clipping, and I also found the traveler's insurance ad about this specific haunting. Okay. So this one is also probably one that you haven't heard of. It takes place in the town of Odon and it's in west central Indiana and it's like just a very, very small town. I guess it just has a crossroads and a couple of rural highways, and nothing much worth repeating ever happened there until one day in the 1940s. Then something very, very interesting happened. A man named William Hackler and his family were just having breakfast, just having a normal breakfast, and they were getting ready to clean things up whenever all of a sudden they started to smell smoke and they smelt it coming from the upstairs bedroom. So they went upstairs to investigate and they triangulated it down kind of to this one bedroom. They go in and they see smoke pouring out from underneath the window frame, and the house was burning from the inside out. And normally, what would be your first thing that you would think of would be the cause of this?
Usually, if a house is burning from the inside out, it's usually electrical.
Yes. But guess what? This 1940s
It wasn't.
farmhouse had not been equipped with any electricity whatsoever yet. So they called the fire department out, and the fire department quickly puts out this fire. And you'd think that would be the end of it. But no. So as soon as the fire department gets back to their station, they get called back to the Hackler family's house because another fire had started in the middle of a feather mattress, just out of nowhere. Yeah. So they rush back. So that was about 8 a.m. And then for the next 3 hours, so from 8 to 10 or maybe 11, yeah, from 8 to 11, the firemen were running from room to room in the house, putting out 9 separate fires. And these fires are just popping up in random places, and everything is burning from the inside out. There was another mattress in another bedroom that caught fire from the inside out. There was a book sitting on a nightstand that caught fire from the inside out. The calendar in the kitchen caught fire. It just burst into flames. A pair of the farmer's overalls just burst into flames.
This sounds like a story that should be coming from this year, not years ago.
Oh, I know. This sounds like a 2020 thing instead of a 1940 thing. So basically, the firemen ended up staying there pretty much all day long, putting out these small random fires. So I guess throughout the day, there had been 28 total fires in the house. So, needless to say, the family was very freaked out about this, and they didn't want to stay inside the house a minute longer. So they dragged their mattresses outside and they just slept on their mattresses in the yard. And so the next day, Mr. Hackler started tearing down the whole house, and they built a new house basically on the exact same spot, but they were never bothered by these random spectral fires ever again. And so the reason that this has like a grain of truth to it is that in the next year, 1941, the Travelers Insurance Company ran an ad in a Collier's magazine featuring the Hackler family. And basically, they were just saying, we will cover any and all fire damage to your home, even if its cause is from the spectral world. And
Interesting.
I did find the articles. And so I just thought that that one was fascinating. It's my absolute favorite legend in both books. Like out of both books, they are my favorite. Let's see if I can find it. I can tell you one more ghost story. I can read you one more ghost story if you want.
Do they have anything in there about the story inn? Does it go by like names of the place or does it go by towns? Because I can tell you
Uh
where it's at.
it usually goes by like the names of places or like what the legend is generally called.
Because it would be Nashville, Indiana.
Um,
I think it's the Blue Lady if it goes by the ghost.
I don't think. No, it doesn't have anything about the story end or the blue lady.
Because that was actually one of the places we were going to stay when I started
Yeah.
mapping out our trip. So basically, if you were to drive south in Nashville, Indiana, and past the story inn,
Mm-hmm.
you probably wouldn't give it another look because it fits in there. It's a the rustic appearance. It's a small building that looks like it's probably an antique shop, but there's a room in the story inn just above the general store that has 3 windows and a private deck overlooking a garden with a queen size bed and a large bathtub with the claw
Okay.
feet.
Yeah.
It's haunted by the Blue Lady. According to one legend, the village of Story was founded by a physician, George Story, in 1851.
Okay.
It was small, sparingly populated farm town with like a few buildings and local businesses. When the railroads and highways were built, it kind of dwindled and was obscure. Then, when the Great Depression took hold, most of the jobs were lost and it transformed into a near ghost town and only had like a few people remaining. But
Okay.
in the late 1980s, a local couple purchased the general store and jump started Story's revelation. Couple added the Story Inn bed and breakfast,
Okay.
and it ran successfully for 15 years. So since then, it has been flooded with tales of the paranormal activity. So a lot of people have the same identical accounts of ghostly happenings that have happened there decades apart. So the ghost of a woman appears by the bed, in the mirror, or the reflection of the window. If the blue light on the nightstand is turned on, others insist that the blue lady will materialize without being provoked.
Mm-hmm.
It's not only the bedside lamp that's earned her the Blue Lady moniker. Her eyes are supposedly ice blue,
Okay.
and she has a habit of leaving behind blue colored ribbons. So she wanders the room if nobody's in there. Other times she will acknowledge yes. The smell of cherry tobacco is said to be in the air after she makes an appearance. Because of that, many people believe she is Jane Story, the wife of the village founder.
Okay.
And apparently she had a strong preference for cherry tobacco.
Well, that makes sense. Okay. So I've got two more stories that I can tell you about as well. Okay. So this one is called the Big Tunnel. This one, it's between Fort Ritner and Tunnelton, and I guess it's one of like the most rural parts of Indiana that this place is located in. And what it is this mile long railway tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever it was being built back in, I guess, the 1900s, I believe 1908, they discovered that since the original tunnel was made completely out of like cobblestone and stuff, and like they had to hire somebody to walk through the tunnel after every train has passed to make sure none of the stones had fallen from the roof of the tunnel onto the tracks. So
Hey, that
that,
makes sense.
yeah, so that like it doesn't cause the next train that goes through to have an accident. So what is said to have happened is,
Just a quick thing. Could you imagine what a pain in the ass it would be if a train derailed in a tunnel?
oh my god, it would be the worst.
Yeah, just like, oh my gosh, I couldn't even imagine. I'd be all like, nope, I'm going home today. I'm not working.
Yep. So the tunnel watchman at the time was a man named Henry Dixon. And like throughout the tunnel, obviously, since they have somebody walking up and down the tunnel to make sure that none of the stones have fallen, there's obviously like little like manholes, they called them. So like you can step in and be safe from getting hit by the train and whatnot while you're on the job. So one late night, next train goes through. And so Henry Dixon waves to the train conductor as the train's caboose is going by, and he continues on his walk. As he's nearing the end of the tunnel, he hears a young lady in distress. She's yelling for help and she's very upset. And so Henry runs up and sees that this man is harassing her. And basically, Henry tries to intervene. Sweet Henry. So the guy says basically, this is none of your business. Go back to walking through the tunnel. Leave us alone. And the woman's still calling out for help. So Henry said, let her go now. And reluctantly, the man loosened his grip and let her go. She ran to Henry, and the man started backing out of the tunnel. But, of course, that's not the end of that. Later on, that man came back and struck Henry dead. Poor, poor Henry. And I guess the blow to his head was so severe that he was probably dead before he even hit the ground.
Oh man.
Yeah. And so, not long after that, it is reported that people began experiencing a strange sound, distant screams, strange lights that seem to float through the dark tunnel. And many people believe that it is Henry Dixon's lantern mysteriously floating through the damp, dark tunnel, still checking for rocks on the tracks. And I just thought that one was great because poor sweet Henry was a very heroic man for going to help that young lady. And so this next one, I think is very, very like just ghost legendy. Like I don't think there's any real history to this one whatsoever. But I thought it was probably one of the more interesting, like pure legends in the story. Okay.
Sounds perfectly fine to me.
All right, and I'm going to read this one directly. It's from Ghost Legends of Indiana by Kevin Green, and it's called The Milk Bottle Ghost. And it says, "This is a story I was told that is very interesting. It was supposed to have happened in the 1940s in a small town in northern Indiana. There were twin teenage sisters who lived in this town, one of them which had recently been found dead, an apparent suicide. Not long after the funeral, a storekeeper who knew the family well noticed the living twin coming into the store, take a bottle of milk, and walk out without paying for it. He didn't pay much attention to this because he knew she was having a rough time dealing with her sister's death. A couple of days later, the same thing happened. The girl came into the store and took a bottle of milk and left without paying for it. She didn't even respond when the storekeeper spoke to her. This time he decided he needed to say something to her parents the next time he saw them. He did see the girl's father the next day and mentioned the incident. The father apologized for his daughter's actions and promised to talk to her about it. When she was confronted by her father, the daughter denied the incidents ever happening. Well, when the same thing happened again a couple of days later, the shopkeeper decided to follow the girl home and confront her himself. To his surprise, she turned down the street away from the house. The shopkeeper, not wanting to be spotted by her, kept his distance and just saw her turning into the cemetery as he turned the corner. Following her, when he got to the cemetery, he couldn't believe his eyes. He saw the girl seem to just sink straight into the ground right over the grave of her sister. A bit delirious from what he had witnessed, the storekeeper went to the grave and knelt down over it. He seemed to be hearing a faint noise. He leaned over and put his ear to the ground, and yes, it was the sound of muffled crying. Not sure what to do next, he ran all the way to the sheriff's office and told him the story. After hearing the sound himself, the sheriff called for more manpower, and the recently covered grave was soon opened. As soon as they lifted the lid on the coffin, they couldn't believe their eyes. There, in the arms of the dead teenage girl, was a live baby and 3 empty milk bottles.
Well, okay then.
Yeah, I thought that one was a pretty exciting story.
I mean, it's pretty neat. Definitely took a turn I wasn't expecting.
For sure. So, I guess obviously what this story is presumably saying is that the sister who had killed herself because she had gotten pregnant out of wedlock, which back then was even more unacceptable than sometimes it still is today, unfortunately. I assume that's why they're saying that she killed herself because she was pregnant. Wouldn't that be what you would assume too?
I would assume so just because I guess I know more of the history and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And when you read this stuff, you kind of get the gist, especially something like that where it's just mainly a tell.
Yeah.
Like let's be honest, that one's like the most unlikely
Oh,
thing to
yeah.
happen.
It's the most
Um
hokey of all the stories, but it is one of the more fun ones. But again, it is definitely not better than the one about the house that caught fire randomly 28 times.
yeah, that's just weird.
For sure, especially for a house that has no electricity.
Like, okay, if it randomly caught fire from the inside out once, like it was just like,
Yeah.
whatever. Like
Or like
I
if it was just the farmer's overalls that burst in flames, because like the some of the fertilizers and stuff could be like flammable, but I don't know. I don't know what to say, especially like the book that was supposedly just randomly caught fire from the inside of it while it was just sitting on an end table, you know?
yeah. Well, for your first time, I don't think you did bad. I give you credit.
Thanks.
I know it's hard to judge, like people listening, it's hard to judge the amount of material you need for an hour. So this might have been a shorter episode, but
My
we are working on the
apologies.
format. We are working on the openings. You're fine. So you can find us on Instagram at Strange, Weird, and Unusual. You can find us on Twitter at Strange, Weird, UN1. We are on Google Podcasts now. We are on iTunes now. We are on the Podbean app. And hopefully soon we will be on Spotify, but we will let you know when that happens. Keep it weird, keep it strange. We hope you join us next time for some strange
weird, and
and unforgettable
unforgettable
conversations.
conversations.
We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.